Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our webinar today. I'm Tony, and I'm Wired's Digital Marketing Trainer. We'll start off this session with a little bit more information about Wired Marketing, just in case you haven't dealt with us before. Now, we're a full-service email marketing agency specialising in email marketing. Our clients range from small businesses to large PLCs and everything in between. Now, we offer managed services through an agency-style setup for clients who want to outsource their email marketing strategies, as well as offering support and training to clients who prefer to create email templates and campaigns before sending them themselves. Whether you're looking for a bespoke template, do-it-yourself email sends, or a full campaign strategy and implementation, we can support you to success. Now, my own experience spans over 20 years, during which time I've been involved with digital marketing projects ranging from small, highly targeted postcode-specific campaigns to full national and multinational integrated marketing strategies. I've worked across a number of B2B and B2C sectors. I love sharing what I've learned through that time. So that's what you need to know about us. We'll now move on to the webinar. Now, we always have a broad spectrum of attendees at our webinars. The main aim of this webinar today is to show you how easy it is to add dynamic content and responsive elements to your email campaigns using the Wired Marketing system. The webinar should run for about 30 minutes. You can contact me directly after the webinar finishes if you've got any questions or if you want to have more of an in-depth conversation. Please feel free to also use the chat options and questions in the console to the right of the screen as well once you've logged in. If you do have any questions as we go through, I'm more than happy to pick them up as we go. So first of all then, dynamic content, what is it and why is it so important? Well, when it comes to our email campaigns, dynamic content is very important for us to be able to get the right content in front of the right people at the right time, but also be able to do it from templates and email templates without having to create separate email campaigns for each and every single part of that segment and the rules that we may want to set the product suggestions and that sort of thing upon. The reason why dynamic content is important is obviously back to the relevancy graph that we've got on the screen there. As you can see, the shotgun approach that a lot of marketers use, it's quite a common approach for email marketing in particular. It does get conversions, but not the greatest, and it's because the emails and campaigns and content that people are receiving isn't completely relevant to them, and they don't feel as if it's a one-to-one sort of personal communication that they're receiving. As we move along using demographic approaches, character, behavioural and interactions, we can start increasing the relevancy and the more one-to-one nature of the communications that we're using. That in turn increases conversions. On average, of course, it's not 100% guaranteed every single time, of course, but yeah, on average we can safely say that the more relevant and timely we are with people, the greater the chances of conversions. It's not necessarily just the case of conversions being sales. Those conversions could also come in the form of engagements, interactions, subscription as well. So it's not always going to be monetary related, but the more relevant we are with people, the more chance they're going to actually do what we need them to do, and the more relevant and helpful it is to them as well. So dynamic content comes into its own when we're looking at email campaigns, because as I say, it allows us to create one template but deliver different content to our different contacts based on rules that we've predetermined. So let's have a quick look at the example email that we'll be using today. So I've already gone and created an email template itself, and we can preview this as per usual using the preview option at the top of the screen. So first of all, we've got some preview text, the viewing browser, the calls to action as per usual. But as you can see, I've also included some dynamic content. So we've got dynamic content for male, we've got dynamic content for females, and some default dynamic content as well. When we look a little bit later in this webinar, we'll also look at turning images off, turning blocks off for mobile as well, and making things a little bit more responsive when it comes to the mobile design as well. So if we were to actually look at this email and we'd say, right, we want to send one email out as it is to our male audience with this content here. We then want to send this content out to our female audience, and then we've also got a default here. So this is everyone that we've got as a contact that hasn't actually let us know whether they're male, female, through data sets or through the data collection exercises that we've used previously. So all this is, all the dynamic data that we're using and dynamic content that we're including in emails is always based on data that we already have. So that's roughly how it would work. We've got basically 3 emails that we'd need to create, but it's not ideal for us. It's going to take a little bit longer. We're going to have to send out 3 separate campaigns. It's going to get a little bit sort of complicated. So what we can do is actually say, right, from our contact list that we're going to send to in, say, a geographical area, we're going to send the same template out, but our female audience will see a slightly different email to the male audience. And for those who haven't actually given us that data, we'll then send a third option. So first of all, what we can do is actually delete these blocks, because at the moment it's one email and everyone would see it, every piece of content, as you can see in that preview. That's not ideal. We don't want our female audience seeing the male content and vice versa. So we'll just get rid of these building blocks in their entirety as it is. So there we go, they've gone. So now we've got a blank canvas. Let's just preview that again. So we've not got any space at all left for that content. What we can do is easily drag that information in. So we go to a build and building blocks. We then scroll right down to the bottom and we choose a dynamic content. So dynamic content we're using from that tool there. And what that does is then put some space in for us to then start being able to add dynamic content in. The build options are exactly the same as everything else we use on the drag and drop editor itself. So first of all, we need to think of that mailbox content. So we had the title, we had some text, we had a call to action, and then we had the image on the right hand side. So thinking about that design, it was a 2-column setup. So what we need to do first of all is create a variation. All we need to do is click on the little arrow there and add a variation. As you can see, there is a default one that comes up as well, but for now we'll just create that male version. So we look through our data set. For this example, we find gender, and then we need to ensure that we include the equal to male, because it's going to be our mailbox. We're going to make sure that we name that so that when we go back into the template, we know which of the variations it is, and we apply it. So now we've got 2 options. We've got a male variation and a default variation. So all we need to do then is add a new variation for female. So the same process, select the data field, in this case gender equal to female, and we click on OK, remembering to name that variation, always important and easily forgotten. Another thing we can do as well, we can actually add extra data fields in. So if we wanted to change the content, not just on male or female, but also by age range, we can also include variations. And it's very similar to creating segments on the system as well there. But for now, we're keeping it simple with the male, female, and default options. So as you can see, we've got them there. So let's go back to default. So this is the content that a person will see if they've not got anything in that data field to say whether they're male or female. And for this one, we did just have 1 column. It was a 1-column setup, and we had a text box. We had, for the title, we had a text box for the content, and then we had the call to action underneath. So it's as easy as just sort of wireframing that if we want to. So this is the default content. And we'll just make sure that's in keeping. We'll make sure we've got that there. So this is if the data is not complete or if that data field's empty. Obviously you wouldn't want to put these titles in yourself if you were creating the email, but it's just so we can see it on the previews when we create it. So this is the text, so this is where we'd have the various bits of information relevant to that content that we're looking at sort of sending to the default audience. We can then change our call to action to match the email and the designs that we're looking for. And as we have done the last few weeks now, you can actually change the formatting of all these using the styles. The button option is here, and we can just change the colour of that, and the alignment should be fine anyway. So if we have a quick look at that in the preview now. we can see that the default content is showing up. Now, if we actually change using this option here, we can look at the different variations that we've set up for the dynamic content. If we choose the mail option, as you can see, there's nothing there yet. So what we need to do is complete that. So that's just as easy as going into variations, choosing the mail version, and then as you can see, the box goes empty because we've not put any content in. So on this one, we did have the 2 columns set up, so we'll set up exactly the same as we had previously. So we had a text box for the title, a text box for the content, and then a call to action underneath. And then on this side here, we had the image. So let's drag an image in, a mail-driven image. So there we go. So same again. This is the dynamic content for the gentleman in our audience. And again, we'll just change that to keep it in keeping. We've got the text we can add there, and we change that call to action again to keep it in line with the design. As you can see, the input of the data, the input of the content blocks is exactly the same as when we've used the drag and drop editor before. It's just a case of we're dragging these all into one content block now. So that's the mail version completed. So we'll save that, and we'll have a look and see how we're faring now. So it automatically comes through with the default content. We can now test it with the mail content. We'll apply that. And as you can see, that's now dragging the mail content through. So if we would send this out and our contact had mail in the data field that we've chosen, then it would now show that content, not the default content or the female content. It would purely show just that mail content. And then to finalize this piece, we can go back in and do exactly the same for the female content. So we had the headline, we had the body, we had the button for the call to action. But as you can see, what I've not done there is actually included the columns. So you've got to remember that the column formats don't stay set across the default variations. You need to create everything from fresh. So 2 columns, we've got the text, we've got another text, we've got the call to action, and then we've got a female driven image. So we'll drag, for argument's sake, this one over this time. And then we'll just resize that a little bit using the resize. And we'll center it up just to make it look nice and tidy. So this is the dynamic content for our female contacts. And we'll just change the color, add a little bit of space in there. We'll change our call to action to match, and then the color of it. So everything now should be fine. So let's save that. So it's not taken us as long as creating 3 email campaigns. Now what we can do is send this email campaign out, and it will render slightly differently for our male, female audience and the people who've not given us that information yet as well. So there's our default. We can check that the male one's rendering. So as you can see, the dynamic content for male and the male image. And then let's just check that female one just to make sure all above's both there as well. And there we go. So our female audience will get the female driven image, which is same as the deal of the week underneath. So that's just how easy it is to add dynamic content into the email campaigns themselves. So just a quick recap of that. We go to build, we drag the dynamic content box in to wherever we want that dynamic content to go. It always comes through with a default setting, just in case that the data field that we're looking to draw the information from is blank. So that would always be that default. So we need to create one. We then add as many variations as we need, within reason of course. And then that means we can be really specific, really relevant, really targeted, and very, very personalized with the content that we're actually delivering to the contacts now as well. It's not just a case of personalization being included in the names and the personal details. we're actually being much more relevant and much more personalized with the content we're delivering, and we're not having to create individual campaigns for each and every part and subset of our segments and contact lists and address books that we're actually going to be using. So it's a much more flexible way of doing things, and in theory I suppose you could actually create one template that did everything for you going forwards. It's a very flexible way of working. And really it's just a case of knowing the data that you've got and then deciding to target specific segments of content with that data. So that's the dynamic content blocks. We've also got, as you may have seen under the tools, an external dynamic content box. Now this is a little bit different. What this does is actually bringing dynamic content through from external source based on rules that you've set. It's usually used for things like coupon codes that are set up individually on an e-commerce site. So that e-commerce site would create one unique coupon code for that customer. You can then drag that information through and input it into the template of the email itself. So it's not quite as flexible as the dynamic content box, but it does give you ways and means of actually dragging dynamic content in based on rules from external sources. If you were to use that, it's just a case of dragging a URL feed in with a little snippet of code, and it will always save a little placeholder for you there. The system won't show you that data because again it's got to drag it based on rules from that external source, so you'll never see that as exact as the approximation of information in the content and the template preview itself. It will just show you that there's a box being saved for that content. It's not used as often though, due to the fact that the dynamic content can usually give you what you need, and it's a much quicker and simpler way of doing things. So that's dynamic content in the actual email itself. There is another section where we can actually add dynamic content, and that's in the actual creation stage, and we can do this under our campaign setting options. So if you click on campaign settings on the setup page, the create page, as you can see down here, we've got a dynamic content option. And what that does is it allows us to add dynamic content in the subject lines and also for the from name. So we'll keep subject lines alone, and as you can see it's got the same box as the dynamic content box we've just been filling in on the email campaign itself. So it comes through with a default. So based on this we would say that a default subject title would be dynamic content webinar default, just for ease of use. Now what we can do is we can actually choose, based on our data fields and the data that we hold against each contact, we can also choose whether to send, in this instance, different subject titles to males than we do females. So say we're a famous retail brand and we want to send a slightly different subject title out. So say, for argument's sake, males fashion update rather than female fashion update, that sort of thing. So we can add a male option. So what we then do is we'll choose male, and we can say that that subject line would go out to males. So it could be dynamic content webinar for the gentleman audience, that sort of thing. We could do exactly the same for a female audience, and we can use gender again, make sure we're pulling the right information through, give it a name, always the same process when we're looking at using these data fields and the dynamic content, and then we can say, and this is the subject title for our female audience. So then we're adding dynamic content in and sending different subject lines based on the separate rules that we've set. If we include that with dynamic content in the email campaigns themselves, that's much more powerful all of a sudden, because we're being very specific, basing our subject titles and content based on certain fields that we've already got created and we've got data collected on. So if we're really wanting to hyper target things, this is the easiest way of doing it without spending hours and hours creating multiple different email campaigns. We've created one, we're using the rules to drag the content in itself, and that's the magic of dynamic content, that it makes things so much quicker and easier and so very relevant and targeted to specific segments that you choose. The only limit to this again is on the data that you've collected and the data fields that you hold against each and every contact. That's the only limitation that you'll ever find when it comes to this. Other than that, it's a case of just looking and saying, saying, right, how can we create and specifically target to everybody that we need to do based on these templates that we're creating. And that's basically dynamic content. It can be a little bit complicated when you first get into it. As usual, at Wired, we're always open to any questions that people may have, especially if you're looking at it just wondering how you might be able to implement it in your own email campaigns. We're more than happy to take any calls and give you advice on how you can actually start using it, because as I say, it's a very, very, very powerful tool that sometimes can be underutilized in the system. There's nothing to be afraid of with it. It really is a fantastic way of getting personalized and relevant content to the right people at the right time, and obviously driving conversions as a result of that. So that's the dynamic content. Obviously there are certain responsive elements that we can include and exclude to a degree in our email campaigns as well, depending upon what we're wanting to do. So first of all, let's preview this this template that we've already created. We've got the dynamic content set up in there now. So it's quite a short and sweet email, and it's going to be delivered with content relevant to the people that we're sending to based on the data fields. So say at the bottom here we've got a deal of the week. If we were to look at that in the mobile, we might be thinking, right, well, yeah, it looks all right. Obviously with the mobile responsive designs it helps as well, but there might be certain elements that we want to move to get certain call to actions in front of various other things. So ideally we'd always want the call to action to be above the fold of the email itself. So as you can see, that's a really good example. We've actually got 2 calls to action above the fold there. But say we didn't really need the social sharing links that we've got here. Say they were detracting from it a little bit and they were pushing things a little bit out of kilter on that smartphone. What we can do is we can actually hide on mobile devices only those social links. So all we need to do is click on the social links, go to Styles, go to Mobile Display. It's always under the Styles, Mobile Display, and then we can hide this block on mobile devices. And it's as easy as that. You'll then see a little icon pop up, and it's basically a smartphone with a little cross on it. If we now preview that email campaign again, on the desktop, they're still there. On the tablet device, yep, they're still there on both formats. But on the mobile, they're now missing. And that's because obviously we've decided to remove those from the mobile device. We could do the same with the preview header text and view in browser if we wish. So again, we just need to highlight that block, go to Styles, Mobile Display, and then hide the block. And it's literally as easy as that. We don't need to know how to code. We don't need to mess around with creating new templates. What we're doing is optimizing again that email campaign for the device that this is going to render on. So we'll preview this, and again it's still all showing on the desktop and on the tablet. When we go to the mobile device, now it's missing as we've asked it to do. So it's a good way of getting things in the right place. If something's sort of detracting from the call to action and that call to action's underneath the fold, or there's various other reasons, maybe images, you don't need the image, we can do exactly the same on this. So we click on the image itself, and then we have 2 options when it comes to images. So we can hide that block on mobile devices, and again that will just remove it from the mobile rendering. Or the other option we have here is preserve image size on mobile devices. Now sometimes you might be in a situation where you don't want the image to resize for some reason, and that is an option that you can choose to happen when somebody is looking at your email campaign on a mobile device as well. Something maybe not used quite as often, but the option is there if you do want to do so. But again, the main thing is that if you're finding that images are taken away from click-throughs on mobile devices, or certain elements don't need to be there on a mobile device, you can still have it on everything else, you just hide it on the mobile. So as easy as just clicking on it. We then go to preview, and as you can see, we've got the desktop which still has the image on, we've got the tablet that still has that image on, and now we've not got it there. And as you can see, the photo turned off on phone option is where that image was, and the same on both. So again, another way of being ultra sort of targeted and personalized with not just people through the dynamic content with each contact, but also you can then start looking at separate devices as well and making them look slightly different and optimized for each and every send. And that's the best way to get the best results from your email campaigns, is to constantly look at the data, use that data to make decisions. In this case, we're looking at the default content, the dynamic content. We're also using responsive elements to make sure that everything's rendering correctly on that specific device that they're looking at. So as you've seen, the system does make it easy to add dynamic content to email campaigns. That increases the relevancy and ultimately the return on investment of your email campaigns by offering your contacts more personalized content based upon rules that are set through the data fields. So that's the end of the webinar. Hope that you found it useful. And that you have now a better understanding of dynamic content and how easy the system makes it to add the dynamic content elements to your email campaigns through the Wired system. Also, when you're looking at the subject titles and the from names as well. Now, contact details are on screen. At Wired, as I mentioned before, we're very open to any questions that you might have. So please feel free to contact us if you want to see how we can help you achieve email marketing success, or if you want to have a chat about what you're doing with your campaigns at the moment. Our next webinar will be another live session on Friday the 4th of November at 2 p.m. We'll be showing you how to build surveys and forms and how to put them to use. So to register to attend that, please visit our website. And finally, the Wired team and I would like to thank you for attending our webinar today. We wish you every success with your email marketing. Thank you very much. We hope to see you at our future webinars. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.